On this episode of the OG and Crab Show, free agency has officially begun, and the Pirates have made some roster moves to make space. The big topic, though, it's finally time to talk about the CBA, and we'll offer our predictions on the upcoming lockout. Play me a song, Crab. Welcome back to the OG and Crab Show. I'm OG, and joining me as usual is Crab. How's it going, Crab?
Crabby.
What are you crabby about tonight?
Just in general, just being a crab. Just my normal crab stuff. Yeah, my usual crabbiness.
So we are 5 days hence of the World Series, which means that some things are happening. Nothing super exciting, but some things are happening in baseball current events. Before we talk about the roster moves that the Pirates did since we last spoke, our former skipper found a new job. Derek Shelton has been named manager of the Minnesota Twins. Do you care?
Not particularly, but I find it interesting that he got recycled so quickly.
And back to where he came from, too. He was the bench coach there under Rocco Baldelli before he was hired to come manage the Pirates.
Yeah, I would assume that's because he is good at losing and they are planning on tanking. And that's about it. And they have a prior working relationship, and they thought, oh, this guy is fine. He can do losing. That's about all there is to say about it. I did watch a little bit of it just out of curiosity, his press conference, and it was fine. You know, he didn't say much about Pittsburgh, so.
Yeah, I think he was diplomatic in whatever he did say, and I agree. He probably is going to be the sacrificial lamb there, as many predicted he would be with the Pirates, and he wound up being just that, even if it took a while to fully bear that out. But yeah, he's got a new job, not even 1 year after losing his chair in the Pirates dugout.
Good for him. Maybe he'll take some loser coaches with him to Minnesota from the Pirates so we can get rid of some loser energy.
Time will tell. So today is the day that free agency opened up, and that required a bunch of action in the transaction tracker. The Pirates.
Are you saying we're signing Kyle Tucker? Is that what you're trying to say?
No, we're not signing anybody yet. Free agency only opened up at 5 p.m. On the day that we're recording this. But that also made it a deadline for guys who would become minor league free agents. If you want to keep that from happening, you need to add them to your 40-man roster. The Pirates did that with one relief pitcher, Ryan Harbin, who I didn't really recognize the name. But
I got nothing.
He was going to be a minor league free agent at 5 p.m. if he was not added to the roster, and I guess they don't want that to happen, so they added him to the 40-man. He's 24 years old. He supposedly has a really good slider. He's a reliever, and we'll see what happens with him.
Some they names love a guy with a slider. They love sliders.
Oh, yeah, sliders all day. Spam the slider. So earlier in the week, there was news leaked, because it's supposed to be not public when players are placed on outright waivers. The Leo Verpagero, G1 Bay, and Jack Little were placed on waivers earlier in the week. 3 days ago, because that's the period of time. And so today, they either needed to have been claimed, or they would clear waivers and be outrighted and ultimately wind up electing free agency. So surprisingly, 2 of the 3 were claimed. If you weren't paying attention, do you have any
actually-
guesses as to who and to where?
I was not paying any attention to this whatsoever.
I had a feeling.
Who was it again? Yeah.
Jack
Who
Little.
was it again?
Jack Little.
I don't even know who that is. Who is that?
He's a guy. He's one of those guys that they picked up off of waivers like 15 minutes ago, and like it was after the season ended, I believe. And so he was just one of those like transient names that comes and goes. And people joke about like Bucko legend Jack Little, even though he never wore the uniform, never really. I mean, he was just occupying a spot on the 40 man for a minute. He was claimed by the Tigers today. And
I thought I was supposed to guess.
oh,
what the hell?
I'm sorry. Well, I blew that one.
Well, I guess Jack Little. So
Okay.
Jack Little.
Jack
And
Little.
who was the other two?
The other two who were placed on waivers were Leo Verpagero and Jiwon Bay.
Ooh, God, they're.
Did either?
And
Well, one of them got claimed. You have to figure out
I'm gonna
which
say it
one.
was-
and
I
to
think it
where.
was Bay. I bet you it was Bay,
Correct.
and I don't know where.
Any guesses?
Milwaukee,
No.
Cleveland,
No.
Tampa.
No.
Wait a minute.
Last guess.
No. Cincinnati.
The New York Mets.
What?
Yeah.
That's the David Stearns coming out in that.
That was my thought too. That you can take David Stearns out of Milwaukee, but you can't take the Milwaukee out of David Stearns.
They like him because he has a run tool. He has one tool
guessed.
and it's run hard.
I guess they think they can teach him how to steal a base. We'll see. And so that means that Leo Verpagero cleared waivers and is now a free agent. So that is the final nail in the coffin, as if there weren't enough nails in the coffin, for Ben Cherington's first trade as GM of the Pirates when he traded Starling Marte to Arizona for Leo Verpagero and Brennan Malone. Brennan Malone still technically exists, but he's probably not going to make it past the threshold of the hospital he's always staying in. And so that's it. That trade
That's
is
a pathetic trade.
over.
Yeah, that trade sucked, and it's depressing that we are so far down this guy's like tenure as a general manager that we are seeing the end of his first group of trades, and they have given us approximately nothing at the
And
major league level.
Peguero spent
And
like 4 years on the 40 man. Like he was given a lengthy time to prove himself. Not so much at the majors. He didn't get a lot of major league playing time, but he didn't even make.
there was that game
much
where he hit like
noise.
3 home runs
This
in
year.
Co-
Yeah,
in
he did hit
Colorado,
3 home
though.
runs in Colorado, but apparently that's not enough to keep a roster spot for a guy who is ostensibly a shortstop. And they had him playing first base some this year. There were some last ditch efforts to find him a home on the infield dirt, and just dude didn't hit except for that one game in Colorado. He had pop when he made contact, but just never put it together here. There's
It just
a chance
sucks that he was on the 40-man roster for so long. Just like, I'm just over all of this like detritus type
Mhm.
stuff where these guys just like never, do anything or go anywhere, and there's never any change, and every year the same guys. It's like, just either you can hit or you can't hit, and if you can't hit, then get them the fuck out of here. I'm so tired of this crap. These guys are crap, and we're talking about these assholes. They're terrible, and these trades suck, and it just pisses me off. And it's just fuck Leo Verpagero. Fuck that asshole.
There aren't very many trades of that early period left to put to bed. This one dragged out the longest. I'm struggling to think of any other. The Jameson Tyone trade tree is kaput. The Musgrove trade. I guess we have some very distant leavings from the Musgrove trade. That's what got us David Bednar, and David Bednar got us Rafael Flores, and Rafael Flores, who knows, I think that's it. That's all
What about the
that's left of
Bell?
all those teardown trades. Bell
What
was
about the
Will
Bell trade?
Crow and Eddie Yean. Eddie Yean, I believe, is a free agent now. I think he also becomes a free agent after never appearing.
So nothing.
Nothing.
They're so bad at this asset. I mean, they can't do anything. Oh my God.
Yeah, they
I saw
traded
today
off all those trades that we've talked about ad nauseum and during the teardown phase. Netted David Bednar, which in turn netted Rafael Flores, who may or may not be a fringe major league catcher and or first baseman. Who knows? That's it. That all those like Tyone, Musgrove, Marte, Bell, nothing.
Well, that's pathetic, and we should probably stop talking about it.
Yes, we should. And I won't even mention the two guys who were DFA because it's not important. But they
who
did.
were they?
Oh, well, if you want to know, Michael
Just
Darrell
mention them.
Hicks, reliever
Okay,
who pitched like very, very briefly this year with the Pirates. He's DFA. And Dugan Darnell, who is another one of those guys who they picked up off of waivers after the season and have already discarded. He's also a reliever. So happy trails, fellas. And that's it. That's it for the transactions. That's it for the Pirates little corner of the opening night of free agency. I'm sure other fan bases are super excited to talk about what free agents their teams might acquire, but we, of course, are not. So is that enough current events? Should we get into the meat of
there's nothing else to talk about. I mean, the World Series is over. Isaiah Kiner-Flefer sucks at base running. They should have never pinch run for him, and Bo Bichette should have been on third. And it would all been moot if the Blue Jays could just hit with runners in scoring position, but they couldn't. So they lose. I'm sad for Canada. Let's hope the Dodgers get a three-peat. Just to fuck, because I'm an accelerationist and I want to see the system burn down.
Well, you know, they'll go out and get basically whoever they want. They get first pick of everybody out there who's available. Maybe they'll sign Bichette. Maybe they'll sign Kyle Tucker. They already exercised their option on Max Muncy, so he'll be back. They're in fine shape. So you wanted to talk about labor, the CBA.
A little bit to what I can actually talk about it. Yeah, because I'm tired of reading and hearing misnomers all over the internet as far as the language of what this shit means, and it just is pissing me off to no end because I just don't understand. This is not super rocket science-y stuff, but everybody acts as though this is the most intense, scary thing ever. And they act mystified by it, and I'm just perplexed.
Well, it doesn't help when all of the media outlets, here we go blaming the media, treat it that way. So
it's fake news. It's fake. Everybody's
the drumbeat from the Rosenthals and the Passons et al. Is, ooh, there's a lockout coming. Ooh, baseball's going to shoot itself in the foot. Very spooky. But what are some of the misconceptions that you're hearing that are upsetting you?
It's just people are talking. First of all, there is going to be baseball next summer in 2026. They have a contract that expires at the end of 2026. It expires, let's see. It expires on December 1st, 2026, following the 2026 season. So I have heard and read and just consumed this narrative that's out there in baseball land that the players are going to strike.
Yeah,
and that's not going to happen.
Too. It won't. Of course not.
Yeah.
They have a contract. It's valid. And short of something just absolutely unthinkable happening vis-a-vis management, like withholding pay or something, there's not going to be a strike in the middle of the season. Like I keep hearing people pitch the idea
they're not going to do that.
Of like, oh, they're going to strike to pull the rug out from under ownership and deprive them of their playoff revenue, or even as early as the All-Star break, to deprive them of their All-Star extravaganza revenue from the media. It's like, are you kidding me? I mean,
the only thing I can think that people would, the only reason why I think that people would think that is because of what happened in 1994, or just, I don't think most of these kids on the internet lived through 1994. I mean, they probably weren't born then. A lot of the people on the internet that are talking about this were born literally in 2003.
Heck, we were kids.
Right, we were kids, but like in the middle of the season stopped because the players went on strike. But that was a different set of circumstances that are not applicable to this set of circumstances. We already saw exactly what the playbook is going to look like in 2021, when that last labor contract was over in December of 2021, and the owners withheld work through a lockout. That's the definition of a lockout. Don't come to work. We don't want you here.
Yep.
And the players say, we want to work. We'd like to work. We'd like to do our jobs. And the owners said, no, you are literally locked out. That's where the definition comes from locking the factory doors.
Mm-hmm. And in
that is what is going to happen.
In 94, the reason that they had a strike was they were playing the season without a new contract. The previous CBA had expired, and they agreed to start playing under a memorandum of understanding. And the owners, after 2/3 of the season, I think it was in August, it was later in the season, they started messing around with payments into the pension, or some kind of benefits package was not being funded, and the players saw that as a bridge too far, and that's when they called the strike. Is that your recollection?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I've read. That's the recollection of it. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so they didn't have a contract in 1994. That's how there was a strike.
Correct. Yes, and the owners then were still of the mindset that the union should not exist. At least some of them were. There were certainly some really old school owners that were part of Major League Baseball in 1994, and they specifically were fucking around with their legally obligated payments to the players in order to be dickheads, basically. And when Donald Fear says that the players felt like they were pushed into it, that's a quote that's, you can find on anything, any newspaper article or any book related to the strike. That's what he's talking about.
And you also had, just to, add some color to the environment at the time, there were very real instances of collusion that preceded all of that as well.
Yes, that was earlier in the timeline here.
Yes, that was prior. That was in the late 80s.
And that was in the 90s. That was around the core. The 1990 labor issues dealt with some of the fallout from the collusion of the 80s, which was the owners not wanting to pay the players in free agency, and the owners getting caught red-handed and getting taken to court and being told, hey, you can't do that, and then paying out a settlement to the players. That's part of the distrust. But to the point of what's going to happen this following season, it's not going to be it's not going to be a play-by-play or blow-by-blow of 94, because there is a valid contract. And so the owners are going to lock out the players and then go from there.
Yeah, like it's not impossible that they strike, but it would just require just extraordinary circumstances that I just can't even give the time of day to. So it's not worth worrying about. It's not worth getting your dander up over. And the thing to start thinking about is not whether or not the players will strike. They will not. It's whether it's how the lockout will go. I think the thing to really look forward to and to give a lot of thought about is what will actually take place and what will be the negotiating sticking points of the lockout. If you think back to the winter of 21 and 22, the last lockout, we had toes being dipped in the water over a cap and floor system that was really a pretty lame pitch, the way that it at least got described. I remember hearing about like a $180 million ceiling and a $100 million floor, which is kind of laughable given what we know about Major League Baseball revenues. That is the kind of structure that to me sounds like it was just like designed to be shot down so that it wouldn't be that there wouldn't be any negotiation about it. It was batted away as a non-starter by Tony Clark at the time. And I want to know, with all of the chatter and all of the trial balloons being floated in the media and just even directly in the open by Manfred and his surrogates, what are they going to push for? Because I have my own thoughts about what they might or might not be willing to go to the mat for at this time. But there's a lot of smoke and there's a lot of talk, and I don't remember there being this much of it this early in the last sequence. But the last sequence was also kind of different and special because we had sort of an early skirmish around COVID. If you remember, they had to come up with sort of a back of the napkin CBA to play the COVID season, where there was a lot of back and forth about how much the players would get paid for playing a partial season and how long that partial season would be and service time and on and on and on. And so they managed to get those 2 months played in 2020. And then only a year later, they are entering a lockout for a real CBA of 5 years, the one that we're going to wrap up a year from now. So do you have any thoughts or ideas about how you think it's going to go based on just like having your ear to the rail and what you're hearing and what you're seeing? Like, does this feel any different than previous instances
it all
of
comes down,
lead up to a labor fight?
All these things are always negotiated behind closed doors half the time. They're already talking. So things eventually are going to leak out. That's probably what some of these people are in the media are intimating, is that over the summer, we're going to start getting big time leaks from each side trying to game public opinion as to what will work for their side. So some of that is going to be happening, but and that happens every time. Last time in 2021, if I remember correctly, there was some hard cap proposal that had a revenue sharing floor and all these targeted things that the owners pitched. And if I remember, it was like 200 million and 160 was the floor and the cap was 200 or something like that. And there was a penalty if you went over it. And so it's somewhere in an NFL or NHL style system. I suspect that they'll try to do that again. Last time there didn't seem to be much of an appetite coming after COVID because they had taken such a hit during COVID. There did not seem to be an appetite to lose actual games, right?
Yeah.
In past labor fights, they have lost games, right? In 1972 was like the first one. They canceled 13 games. And that was just in 72, that was the one to show that strikes were going to be used as a weapon and kind of put the fear of God into the owners, because the big shift started in 1966 when the players hired Marvin Miller from the Steelworkers. And then he turned the Players Association into a real union. And by 1968, they had an agreement that said these are the minimums, these are our grievance procedures, and there was just some basic protections. And that was just the thing they built on for all the future struggles. So in 72, they struck for 13 games. In 73, there was another strike that was focused on like arbitration and benefits. That lasted for 2 days. Now that's on the players' side because that's their only economic weapon, is to strike when there's no contracts in place, or if there is some kind of chicanery from the owner's side of things trying to break the union, because technically under the national labor law of the country, you can't negotiate to break a union if a union is in place. And then in 74 and 75, there was big fights over free agency, and we got free agency. The big labor strikes that we can kind of use as kind of a totem as to what might happen in the future, what will be important, is in 81, the players walked out for 2 months over free agent compensation. They lost 700 games. That was a big one. And the owners compromised right away. 85, there was a short strike, mostly about pensions and more about some salary arbitration stuff. And then 90 was the big one, because the owners closed spring training to pressure players into accepting some bullshit salary arbitration stuff and different kind of free agent rules. And I think at the time, if I remember correctly, like from reading about this, there was some kind of like leftover stuff from the NFL where the owners in baseball were trying to take a page out of the NFL because they had just had a strike in the NFL, a lockout in the NFL in the late 80s.
Yeah.
But the 90 lockout, just they lost spring training games and they didn't lose any regular games. 94 was the big one, and that was obviously over the cap. And then in 2002 and 2000, I think in 6 was the next one. There was no games lost, but again, they just took the foundation of all that stuff that came before and built a luxury tax, built some more revenue sharing, changed salary structures on top of, everything from Marvin Miller forward. And then fast forward to the 2021-2022 lockout, which was the one we just lived through, where we didn't lose any games, but the owners did something different where they imposed a lockout almost immediately after the old CBA expired. So that means the players can't train, teams can't make deals. And, all they did was kind of niggle over service time and free agency and minor league pay. Mm-hmm. And, we remember it because we just lived through it. It lasted about 2.5 months or so.
It wound up compressing the season. I think they were late starting the season. They got all 162 in, but they were close to a week, I believe, late beginning the season versus the original schedule. But they crammed it all in.
Right, and they didn't lose any games, right?
Yeah, they did not.
So the big thing that came out of that era was minor league unionization. So across all of these labor problems in baseball, obviously owners always want to control the work rules, and players want more money and push back for more freedom in the workplace. That's what this is all about.
Yeah.
And so I should expect that there will be all of these things. I would expect that they will want to argue about getting guys paid faster and some of the ideas that the union had in the last CBA. But if the owners decide that they want to really go for broke and relive, some version of losing games like in the 70s and 80s, then, we might see some kind of change around arbitration. Maybe there's 4 years of arbitration. Maybe, the owners give that up and the players accept some other mechanism for salary control, because those are going to be some of the issues that they're going to definitely want to tackle. But
I mean, to my mind, a lot of the convolution, things like arbitration, and the reserve period, all of these artifices of control that have kind of built up over time, and they've been around long enough at this point that like multiple generations have entered and left the sport where these were just how it is. It's
Bro,
no
all
long.
this goes back to the 1860s, honestly.
Yeah,
I mean, they've been
there was a
fighting
very
since,
long period
yeah.
of the reserve clause being the like that was like 100 years of baseball, and then you just recounted the decades leading up to 94 where they were kind of adding on bit by bit the structures, the forebears of the modern labor structure of baseball. But for the
the labor structure of baseball comes out of the Steelworkers Union. The Steelworkers in Pittsburgh had this, you know how in today's game, you know, you might watch a game with Uncle Jimmy and Uncle Jimmy says, you know, how do these guys get a raise? They can't hit, right? I've heard this before in my life. I'm sure you've heard it. You know, you see a guy hit arbitration who sucks, who's got like a 5 ERA, and somehow he's getting $1 million raise. That came out of the Steelworkers setup. That's how the Steelworkers were built. And so Marvin Miller kind of took some of the things that were happening in this kind of industrial post World War II bubble that we had in the country, where we had all these, you know, steel workers and auto workers. He cherry picked some of the stuff from those labor contracts and put them in baseball. But they're man-made. So if at any point in time they decide, hey, let's blow this thing up, and Tony Clark, I'm Rob Manfred, let's discuss this and actually have like a real good faith discussion. What would it look like for you guys to just blow up the arbitration system? Like, you can do that at any particular time and negotiate all of these different, you know,
all of this
get
is
rid
a
of arbitration.
contrivance.
All of it is correct. It didn't just fall from the sky, arbitrarily made. It was made by lawyers and people, and people came up with it.
And
so it can go away.
What I think about all of that when you consider the events of the 70s and the 80s that you described and how that led up to 94, that was all fresh in people's minds. All of those earlier struggles and battles were fresh in the minds of the members of the union and the union leadership and the owners. Like, it was very raw. And then the evolution of like the language of the CBAs since has been, it's kind of like plateaued. Like, they'll make little changes around the edges, and there is a march of progress to a degree, but we're not seeing the wholesale changes to the uniform players contract that would have been taking place back then. And I think that you have like the current generation of players, they grew up, and even their fathers, if they had fathers who played baseball, but just in terms of like how long these things have been in place. If you go back 30 years to 1994, that's like 2 generations of ball players at this point. And so as far as they're concerned, it might as well always have been this way. There's always been arbitration. There's always been free agency after you get 6 years of service time. Like, these things have been around so long that you could forgive people for just being like, well, that's just how it is, instead of thinking of it as like, no, these are just a contrivance that we just slapped together, and they kind of evolved out of compromise, and compromise stacked on top of other compromise. And some of these are hard-won victories, and other things they're like arbitration. Everybody complains about it. All the players don't like going through it, even though it's their pathway to getting closer to paid for the value of their work sooner. They don't like the way that it happens. They don't like the hearings. They don't like how it isn't just free agency after a few years. And so that's what puzzles me. Is it's almost like they don't think of getting rid of all of that stuff and trading the idea of a cap. Like a cap is just this dirty word. When to me, there's a certain amount of money in baseball. Every
Well,
year,
that's what you're
baseball.
describing. Not to cut you off, but what you're describing is how the NFL got its cap. The players traded free agency for a salary cap because their free agency was dog shit and it didn't work, and they were suing the league over whatever garbage they had in place. And at some point, the union and the league said, "What would you trade? Well, how can we do this differently?" And the league said, "Will you take a salary cap for proper free agency?" And they were like, "Yes." And the league was like, "Oh my, what? Oh yeah, holy shit! Are you fucking kidding me?" And they're like, "Yes, we will trade this."
CTE is a hell of a drug, I guess.
Well,
got
right,
their bell rung one too many times.
Yeah, but that lock. So, but yeah, that is how what you're describing is like people frustrated with the system, their versions of how the system was inefficient, and then simply just blowing it up wholesale for something different. That's what happened in the NFL. So it's not implausible that something like that could happen in Major League Baseball. What I think is an impediment towards that is this obnoxious mythologizing and, romanticizing of the game. Somehow it's this different unicorn and it can't be touched, and it's some way different than the other sports, and those other sports do it differently, but we have the perfect sport and therefore it has to always be this way. Well, it wasn't always that way, so the entirety of baseball has always been about a kind of a push and pull of, forward progress, whether it be through, labor rights or, desegregation, and then going backwards to some degree because it's still the same game it's been since the 1860s. So I would suspect that unless there's going to be some kind of like push from below, from the rank and file, from guys like Evan Sisk and Jack Sawinski, who were like, this fucking sucks. We need to get paid because our careers are going to be over because, yeah, we're not very good. So while we're here, like there's plenty of NFL players that are not good that get paid and then leave the league, right? Yeah. There's a defenseman somewhere in hockey that's getting paid. There's, hell, there's fucking college football players right now that are getting paid more than
the pay
Stevens.
Structure of baseball is incredibly top heavy.
It is incredibly top heavy. So my point is that whenever there will be that push is when you might see some change, but it's got to come from below. It's got to be, in a sense, a union is a democracy in a workplace. And so you'd have to see some kind of democracy within the democracy, if that makes sense, to push that forward. I'm not sure if that's going to happen.
Message that was coming out of Manfred doing that clubhouse tour that famously bubbled up into a story where Bryce Harper confronted him in the Phillies clubhouse and, dressed him down over, don't come in here talking about a cap. And the message that Manfred was taking to the players reportedly was that if you're willing to consider a cap, there's a way that it can make you more money. And the players are clearly very distrustful of that concept, but they should be because this is a league with a history of fucking them over as hard as humanly possible. Like as far back as, when John Montgomery Ward tried to create the Players League in the 1880s and got his ass handed to him, which then in turn led to the Supreme fucking Court giving baseball an antitrust exemption, saying that it wasn't interstate commerce, which is total nonsense. But it meant that the players could not use whatever available labor law there was at the time in the early 20th century to fight back. So for decades, they had to take it from behind with no lube. They got screwed. It wasn't until 1975 did they get I'm not tone deaf to these things that the players feel. And to their credit as a union and as an entity, they are well versed in their own history. So they know this and they teach it to that next generation. And, that's why they're distrustful. That's what, because Faye Vincent fucked around in 1990 and said, hey, guys, why don't you negotiate with Bud Selig? Because Bud Selig is the head of the Labor Commission.
in as the owner's, representative. And they got screwed with that. He screwed them and then became the fucking commissioner after and screwed them again. So, I get it. I get and again, Bryce Harper yelling at Rob Manfred is very romantic, and it would make a nice slow motion push in on a documentary of Ken Burns. You see my documentary push here? This is the part where the AI version of James McCullough gets to read that, little piece of script it pans across to them.
Leo Schreiber is still with us. We can get him to do it.
So, we'll see. Again, if here it comes down to this. If how in the world did we lose all of these steel jobs in Western Pennsylvania? If we had these really strong unions, well, the owners control the means of production. It's very simple. And if they set the work rules a certain way, you have two options. You can go on strike. You have three. You can go on strike, get locked out, which are similar ends of the yin and yang, or you can negotiate through your collective bargaining unit, which is your union, or you have four options, or you can not work, go home and not have a job. And a guy in China can make steel with your steel making materials. So unfortunately for the players, or fortunately for them, or unfortunately for them, it depends on one's perspective. For some fans, this will be terrible. For some fans like us, it'll be a panacea. If the owners stay together and hang tight and do what the NHL did, then maybe will Juan Soto come to the negotiating table? No, but guys like Evan Sisk, guys like Jack Sawinski, guys like Leover Peguero will be running to negotiate because they won't have jobs and they need them badly.
To play devil's advocate, I wonder, would it be folly for the union to anticipate that they can't, if the owners are willing to stick together, the union is ultimately going to have a cap imposed upon it. Even when that happens, it's still a collective bargaining agreement. It might be an agreement that one of the sides agrees to after extreme duress of a lockout for an entire season or something like that. And they are in a disadvantaged position and wind up accepting terms that they are really gnashing their teeth over. Why would they not anticipate that coming and kind of judo it and say, well, we know we want to get paid in our primes. We know that we want to get rid of arbitration. There's all of these sticking points that we have been grousing about for decades at this point. Is it worth getting out in front, controlling the narrative, and saying, this is what we want. If you want this cap, this is how we need you to structure it in order for all of us to avoid an unpleasant, protracted dispute? Is that crazy? Does that put them in a really disadvantaged spot where you would never do that because you're giving too much up? Is that why they don't even consider that?
I mean, if my memory serves me correctly, in 2021, when the pitch from the league was here's the outlines of a cap, the first thing I think the union said was let's nuke arbitration. And the owners were no, we're not doing that. And so that was it went
just
nowhere.
Incredibly stupid on the part of the owners.
Right.
What is the matter with you? What is the matter with you? You don't need
now
arbitration.
All of a sudden we're on the,
Are you
now
kidding
we're on the
me?
side of the union.
Are
Instantaneously,
you kidding me?
we're pro-union. Fuck the owners. See how dumb they are? See how irritating they are, OG?
I have a King Solomon's opinion on this, where I think that there is a way for both of these sides to kill their sacred cows and get what they want. And it's baffling to me that either one of them would describe as a non-starter something that they should just not even care about. The owners, if they can get a cap, should not care about any of the pay structure shenanigans that they used to use to approximate a cap. The owners suppress salaries today with the reserve period, the 3 years of team control at minimum, and then the years of arbitration. That is,
which is a vestige of the reserve clause.
Yes,
that came from the reserve clause.
Yeah, it's the reserve
that was
period.
Negotiated, right? So Marvin Miller said, "What can we do to make free agency work for you guys to even get this through your thick fucking skulls?" And the owner said, "Well, we don't understand how we would not have these players in perpetuity. That doesn't make any sense to us. We will never accept this." And Marvin Miller said, "Well, how about 6 years?" And they went, okay. Well, yeah, maybe.
Right. It was a compromise going from all the years, infinity years, to 6.
To 6. Correct.
In order to get free agency after a point. And they've abused that system to hell and back. And so you've got guys who take a decade or more to accrue their 6 years of service time, and they wind up being free agents at 32 when nobody wants them anymore.
That's exactly what the players think. And so I looked it up. There's a Tampa Bay Times article from December 1st, 2021, called "Key Proposals in Major League Baseball Labor Negotiations," where the gist of the article was that, yes, the MLBPA's bargaining position, did include making arbitration eligibility shorter. So this is the owners are saying, hey, we want a cap. And they were like, all right, well, if we're going to do this in good faith, let's talk about it, which is what you're supposed to do. And the union proposed making our arbitration eligibility to 2 years of major league service time rather than the 3 years with the Super 2 bullshit carve-outs, which makes a lot of sense because that would give a lot of guys, players, access to arbitration, get them paid faster, get them what they deserve to be paid. And obviously the owners pushed right back and made counter proposals, and it went nowhere and it died. And so they chucked all that out the window and decided to tinker around the current system that we have. And so, yeah, I mean, it would that's why this is going to require, well, in a perfect world, they would negotiate a new system, and they would all hold hands and sing Kumbaya. And that is not going to happen because even though these are enlightened oligarchs who all have algorithms that help them make billions of dollars, and
I don't believe that. I believe these are all idiots.
No, that's my point. I'm getting to this. They consider themselves to be enlightened.
This is how they see themselves.
Yes, absolutely. And we, as good citizens of this system, this political and economic system we live under, should consider them to be the benevolent oligarchs that are allowing us to survive. And so the way they see themselves is they have all these tools at their disposal, and they'll be damned if they're not going to use them to bring them to bear against the players. And so whether you're an Anheuser-Busch magnate who owns the Cardinals in the 60s, or you're a car salesman, or you're, the Dreyfus family who own the Pirates, whatever, Dick, they're still owners, and they still think they're right, and they're still the lords of the realm. They're just different. They're more erudite. They have AI algorithms. They come from big hedge funds. They're worth billions more than their counterparts and their ancestors were 30, 40, 50 years ago, but they're still dickheads that want to fuck the players. And so if they can't negotiate it, which they probably won't be able to, who do you think is going to win between a protracted battle between enlightened oligarchs that own the means of production, not only in baseball, but throughout the world, or guys that hit balls with bats?
Well, when you put it that way, it'll be the oligarchs. However, very important stipulation on that. It will not be this cycle. It will not
happen this year.
Absolutely. There will 100% be a full 162 game season in 2027, despite all of the doom and gloom and forecasting of the breathless media. There will absolutely be a season, and we already talked about why on prior shows. It's because of the media deals that are coming due the following year. So after 2028, we already talked about this on previous episodes, a whole bunch of local cable contracts that are stopgaps, and all of the national media contracts expire. And Rob Manfred, his final act as commissioner before he hangs up his jacket, not cleats, is to negotiate the next big round of media contracts for baseball. The thing that will make or break the franchise value stagnation that we talked about a couple episodes back. It's all happening in 2028. So they are not going to go to the mat over a cap or not the year prior. They're not going to lose a season right before they go into the final phase of their media negotiations for the following decade. Now, if they get lousy deals that do not cause their franchise values to skyrocket like the NBA just has had happen, then they might feel like they've painted themselves into a corner where in 2032, they feel like they have no choice but to blow up a season and do everything everybody's worried will happen a year from now. But everybody needs to chill out.
It could happen this year. I mean, in 2027, I should say in 2027, that could still happen. I mean, I think people misunderstand what the commissioner is supposed to do, right? And they have this idea of the commissioner of baseball as some kind of benevolent overlord in the mold of Kennesaw Mountain Landis, restoring integrity to the game in the wake of the Black Sox scandal. That version of the commissioner has been dead, and Bud Selig killed it. And so ever since Bud Selig, who was an owner, who owned the Milwaukee Brewers, became, the commissioner for almost 20 years, I think, the idea that the commissioner's job is not to make more money for the owners is ridiculous, because that's all the commissioner is supposed to do, right? Not to go back in the weeds, but like Fay Vincent was the commissioner who believed that his role was to be the fucking trustee of the game, and his idealism was this bullshit that killed him in the long run, because he tried to mediate, he tried to get in between the owners and the players, and hence the owners' profits and the owners' franchise valuations. Even in 1990, that was still a lot of money, and Fay Vincent touched the hot stove and got burnt, and so then they threw him out. And by 92, I think, or 93, in lead up to 94, got rid of him and changed the rules. And the reason I bring this up is because the commissioner is the 31st owner. That's all he is. And so he is going to do whatever it takes to make as much money for the guys that pay him $15 million a year want more money in their franchise valuations. You'll be damned if he isn't going to go and do whatever he can. So is it possible in 2032 we get the big strike or the big lockout or some version thereof? Yeah. But it's also quite possible it happens this time as a test, and they lose a week or two of the season, or 10 games or 15 games, something that might be inconsequential, just to see and test the waters. I wouldn't, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if that happened.
I think it's even less than that. I think all of this talk about salary caps, like actually saying that phrase out loud, is sort of, it's not unprecedented, but it's unusual. They usually kind of tap dance around that phraseology.
And the reason they do that is because in 94, the owners went out and fucked themselves by all taking a different tact and ruining their class solidarity. That's honestly what it was. And so this time around, if they're going to try to impose something like that, there's going to be a top-down gag order from Steve Cohen down to Bob Nutting. Shut your fucking mouths.
But so far, that gag order's not in place because you've got Rubenstein and Davos saying the words. I mean, there's owners out there saying the words. There's Manfred out there saying the words, because we're not quite into the negotiations yet, I guess. But what I think this is all a head fake. I think this is all just to get the union rank and file whipped up into, like, ready to go to battle over a cap. And then when the lockout begins, then they can just walk it back down to the much less acrimonious subject matter of, marginal improvements, just like last time. And it helps the medicine go down easier. Like, whatever small little concessions that the owners want the players to take in this upcoming round will pale in comparison to what they thought was going to happen. And that's why I think this is all just a bunch of smoke. It's not real. They're not going to push for it. We're not going to lose any games. There's not going to be anything more than it's a psyop. I don't think it's anything more than a negotiation tactic to say we're going to put the goalposts way out there and then we're going to move them back nice and close and you can kick right through them.
That's probably accurate because we have seen that play out. And a large reason, like what you're saying, is exactly how we got the luxury tax. How you just described that is exactly how we got any form of revenue sharing. Selig, to his credit, I use it loosely, but he was smart. And because the cap was so, poisonous to the players union, you walk it back and you get backwards and you go, well, what about just sharing a little bit of money, behind the scenes to just like help the Brewers out so we can do more, pay you guys in arbitration and stuff like that. And so, yeah, the players were on board with those things and eventually it became what it is. And so what you're describing is something that has already happened in a sense. And so we are probably likely to see something like that again. And who was Selig's right-hand man at that time? It was good old hugging the medal. It's just a trophy. Rob Manfred.
That's right.
And yeah, so he was one of the guys that worked on the salary thresholds and luxury taxes and revenue sharing agreements.
And this is the same playbook. Yeah,
it's the same playbook. Yes.
So yeah, I don't think I'm very bearish on the idea that we're gonna see really anything significant in this CBA cycle. I don't think we're going to lose any games. I think this is a bunch of smoke. It's certainly not impossible, to your point. I mean, anything's possible. They could surprise us. There could be things that we're not anticipating here from the outside that
well, you have to remember the COVID one. Fighting over COVID was, I think, more indicative of where this one might be sometimes than I think the one after was in 2021, because the fight about getting COVID, like playing games, like the owners were just like, fuck it, we will shut the fucking league down. And the players like, no, don't do that. No, we need to do something. We need to get paid. And the owners are like, well, there's a virus. It'll kill you. Sorry, guys. I think part of the reason why 2021 was a lot easier was because everybody was just trying to get back on their feet, get back to work and get, revenue flowing.
Yeah, there's
again.
an element to
and
that.
So there was no appetite. So it's possible that they might go back to the 2020 playbook rather than the 2021 playbook and say, well, we're willing to shut it down because
I still
we need
think
some
that
kind
the
of cost
owners
certainty.
they're not this time. They're not going to have the appetite for the fight because they know what's coming with the media rights, and they won't want to jeopardize. They have so much more to lose in a 2027 lockout than the players do. The players would lose a year of playtime, which is like really, really significant for that group of players. The owners would be blowing up potentially a decade plus of relevancy and
so that part I don't buy whatsoever.
Competitive. No,
nah, I don't buy I don't buy this. Again, I could pull up the Baseball is Dying article, which I've quoted 8 billion fucking times on this show, because everybody loves the Baseball's Dying stuff.
We've covered
Oh, it's
this
going to
though.
die.
There's a difference with like baseball is not dying. Baseball is not going to leave the zeitgeist. Baseball is going to continue on. All I'm saying is that it's stagnating, and we have the numbers to show it. We went over them in detail a few shows ago. The franchise
and now you're
values are
making
not
the
going
owner's
up.
case. Now you're making the owner's case. They have world-renowned economists that know this very thing, that outsmart us and outrank us. And the owners know that their lines aren't going up. So if they're not going up, then what is one fucking year in the grand scheme of things? Because we're not going up, right?
They're not
it's like
going
saying,
up because their media rights from previous, like they're the last league that's going to get a new set of rights. Everybody else in the last 5 years has gotten their new rights. The NHL did it a few years ago. The NBA got theirs last year. So baseball is the last one to come to the table asking to fill up their bowl, and they're either due for a big payday because there's an appetite for more sports programming, and baseball isn't dead. Baseball does get
because
a lot
of the
viewers.
pitch clock,
It gets
because
a lot.
of
No, listen, it gets good
Ohtani.
ratings. All of that is true. All of the stuff about like people being interested in baseball and having sort of an uptick in interest, attendance is up, not all time, but up from where it had been dipping. It does well on television. All of that is true, but the revenue isn't reflecting it. The money isn't reflecting it. So when they go to get all these new media deals and try to shift all of this into a more national television focus instead of regional, which is what they've been living on for 30 years, and that model's dead.
They've been
That
living
is
on that
everything
since
for
KDKA.
them. It's everything for them in terms of franchise values picking back up again and everybody being fat and happy. They're not going to be fat and happy without that new media contract, and that new media contract is not going to be any good if they shut down the sport a year before putting it on paper. That's what I think.
I do think that there is merit to your argument. I also am of the opinion that if you, what's the idea here that Manfred has an NBA style programming package, right? And so he can sell big chunks of it to Amazon or Apple, or just whatever streamer,
whoever
you
it
want.
is. Yeah.
Well,
find multiple
okay,
partners and
yes.
load it up. Yeah.
Right. And within that, so recently, I can't remember which game it was. There was a game that got flexed out of a spot in the NBA scheduling to go to the streamer. I think it's going on Peacock. It was not on Peacock, and now it's paywalled, and it was somebody I wanted to see, so I'm not going to watch that game. In order to do that, you have to have stars all throughout your league. You have to have Giannis in Milwaukee. You have to have SGA in OKC. You have to have Tyrese Halliburton in Indianapolis. You have to have Jokic in Denver. You're not going to be able to do that in baseball if your option is to flex out a game and you're stuck with the Pirates and Rockies.
Pirates have Paul Skeens.
That's not the same.
The
That's
Reds
not what I'm
have
talking
Ellie.
about. These are 100 lost teams.
I know that,
They're
they're
generationally
stars.
bad teams.
I know, but
That's
they're
not
stars.
what that's
if you're
not what the
if you're
league
talking
is
about
predicated
stars,
on. No, I'm talking about competition on the field because we all know that it's
you're
an
talking about
individual
fan
game
interest.
of nine.
You're talking about
I'm talking
having teams that fans want to see outside of like the diehards in the home markets.
Correct. Okay, that is, yes, because to your point about regionalization, it is a regional sport because there are diehards in Cincinnati that will watch 162 games, and there is me and you that watch all fucking Pirates games. But a national guy who dips into sports periodically wants to see, do they want to see stars? Yeah. But would they want to see, the difference with the NBA is the teams I mentioned are good and the stars are there. They're good because there's more wealth spread through the system so they can have deep rosters with depth and guys that can actually play their positions and are good and can support the superstars and hence put a product on the field or the court or the ice that is worth watching. And that on a Tuesday when NBC wants to flex a Pirates game into the slot, they have something to flex in the future cap system, or they're not embarrassed to put the White Sox and Pirates on national television. And in order to get that, you have to have the things that we have been discussing in order to sell this to the streamers. If not, you're selling more regionalization. You're just selling another version of it. And so Do you think Apple TV is happy that they have a game on Friday night in the middle of the season where Cal Raleigh is stuck behind Root Sports? They can't get him, and instead they have to pretend like give a shit about Paul Skeens and Luis Robert Jr. on a random July night when the players they want they can't get. And so that's part to me of like the problem with selling these things nationally. And I suspect Manfred knows that. And yeah, the timelines are slightly off, but they're close enough within a year now that if you blow it up a year earlier than you expected, because this is coming, obviously time-wise before 2032, why not?
I don't disagree with your characterization of the regional versus national interest factor. I think that's really, really important, but that's not something you can fix in 1 year. That's something that they needed to start dismantling a decade ago in order for it to be just understood in the zeitgeist now. It isn't. And if, let's say that they do go to the mat and they shut down most or all of 2027, they get their cap leading into 2028, it's not going to all of a sudden not be a regional game. We're not going to all of a sudden have fan bases in Pittsburgh and Tampa and Miami, or like pick your small market where there might be like waning fan interest because they're just feeling hopeless in the face of the Dodger juggernaut. Like, that's not going to change overnight. That kind of sentiment is going to take years.
It would have to change. No, it wouldn't, because the initial onset of the salary cap would be exactly like it was in the NHL, which it's 20 years ago, but that's that coming out of the cap, every fucking team had money to spend. So we went and signed Sergei Gonchar and Miroslav Satan and all of these players. Were they great players? No. Were some of them bad? Yes. Were some of them okay? Yeah, that's it. You get a bunch of variances across the spectrum. Some of them were decent, some of them were dog shit. But they got paid. Everybody got to do the fun free agent. Everybody got to win the offseason. And then there was something to cover nationally. The new look Penguins play the new look Islanders tonight on NBC. And you get to, was it a great team? No, not particularly, but it was a narrative to sell that you could put on national television and sell. And so let's say they lock out in 27, the season's done. For just hypothetical, the owners win, right? And so the players take a cap system. It comes with the floor. Instantaneously, our payroll goes from $85 million to we're going to be generous and use the conservative numbers from 2021 and say $180 million. It's a $100 million improvement right there. Yeah, is everybody going to be buying players? Certainly. But suddenly we're going to be looking at players that we never had a chance to get in the market for. And that's exciting, and that's something to sell. And when these teams hit the diamond for that next television contract, every streamer will be able to sell that as part of their narratives and their storylines.
Well, I mean, I would like for that to happen. I guess I'm just too cynical to believe that it could. But
I too am also cynical, and I believe it will be more likely that you get a lockout, they negotiate through spring training, there's a lot of bluster, they don't miss any games because for some reason these owners, half of them weren't even in the league in 1994. They're all terrified of 1994 happening. 20-year-old fucking kids that are on DraftKings on their iPhones, that can't write in cursive, that don't know how to use a fucking wristwatch with a like a non-digital clock. They weren't alive in 94. Their parents were barely fucking in 94. They don't give a flying fuck about that stuff. All they care about is, the shit they care about in the NFL and the NBA, because they're the two most popular sports in the United States for the most part, especially with the youth cohort. So there's tons of discussion and podcasts and blogs about, max contracts and free agency and cap space. So some of these people who are the target audience have no idea about 94. They don't know who these people are. It's ancient fucking history. It's like me talking about the Black Sox scandal, from a
Oh, yeah.
historical perspective, it's fun, but I don't know it.
Stuff that happened way before we were born.
Right. So it's like it's relevant, but it's not. And so but people in baseball are just terrified. They think, oh, we could never do a 94 again. Meanwhile, the people they're selling this shit to are born in 2001. They don't know.
Yeah. I could see that scenario. I'm still cynical. I'm not going to let myself buy into the idea that there's going to be all of this progress in the near term. I think it's much more likely to happen later. But I think you've talked me down from my absolutist position that it absolutely will not happen. I just think it's, single digit percentage chance. The way things stand right now, that it's still very unlikely, but I guess it's not impossible.
Yeah, I would agree it's single digits. I'm largely with you, and I'm just more irritated with the idea that people don't understand like what a lockout and a strike are and how like this shit works. And
Yeah,
that's partly why I wanted to yell at you today.
and I get irritated over the stuff that I guess I got up on my soapbox right now. I get irritated when people perpetuate just untruths that can easily be dispelled by just reading the damn CBA. Stuff
or at
like,
very worst, using the Google machine correctly, the way it was intended to be used.
Like how you'll hear people say the union doesn't get to see the books. Yeah, they do. It's in the CBA. They get to see the books, and they can even send it to their own auditor that they choose. They get to do that for all the teams if they want. They can do that. It's in the CBA.
Correct. That's correct. And if they haven't complained in court about the Pirates spending, what can we extrapolate from that? If the almighty powerful union, who has the complete control of their own economic destinies, don't even see fit to take the Pirates to task, what does that mean?
Now, having read the CBA, maybe not cover to cover, but a lot of it, it's not fun to read. And so I can forgive some misunderstandings and some misconceptions, but to clear up some other things, the luxury tax is not the same as revenue sharing. Revenue sharing is defined in the CBA. The luxury tax is also defined in the CBA. They are two different things. The money collected from the luxury tax does not get handed to Bob Nutting. It gets mostly put into the player's pension fund. And then the rest of it goes into a discretionary fund that Rob Manfred gets to distribute, lately mostly to cover losses for RSNs folding up. That's what
when you talked
the luxury tax funds.
When you talked earlier about like why don't the players just like kind of get out in front of this stuff and like create a better system?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, the outlines of the system are already in there insofar that there's a soft salary cap and there is an ineffective revenue sharing system.
Yep.
It is very likely that they will take those two husks of those ideas and build them out and create something that might be more usable. And it wouldn't take much to do if the union would say, hey, like we'd like to negotiate on the revenue sharing and we'd like to make sure that it's being used for player payroll instead of traject machines and other such nonsense.
Here's an idea. What if they just don't
stuff?
What if they just don't call it a cap? What if they just come up with some euphemism for it where it's expanded revenue sharing and it's more enforcement on that revenue sharing being used for payroll, and it's a stricter luxury tax, and the net effect is a cap floor in revenue sharing, but it doesn't
Guess what
have
you're
that
describing.
name.
Guess what you're describing?
What am I describing?
The NBA system that the players just suddenly went, what? What did we do? Wait, what is this? Like that's happening in the NBA right now because they call it the first apron and the second apron. And the first apron is a soft cap that you get some penalties if you go over.
Yeah.
And then if you hit it hard enough, you get hard capped, which they call the second apron. And so I'm not sure if that's the legal terminology that they negotiated and it's actually called that, or if that's just like one of those euphemisms that was on like a bullet point somewhere that got like, baked into the lexicon,
Yeah.
but like that's what they call it, and that's what you're describing. And so half the time people are talking about this second apron, and it's essentially the NFL hard cap, and like you hit it and you're done. You hit it, that's it. Like you lose, you can't sign that guy that used to be able to kind of like go around the system and do this and that and the other thing through the old system, which is essentially what they have in baseball. They have a soft cap that people go blast through whenever they feel like they want to, and they have no enforcement or very little teeth around the enforcement around it. So it might be likely that they build some of those mechanisms out and to be more robust. And I could see that world happening where nobody calls it a cap. The players agreed to it back in 2002. It's already in there. Past generations agreed to revenue sharing and a luxury tax. So maybe just keep calling it luxury tax.
And if they do manage to expand the national revenue, like to expand the role of the national media revenue, give it a bigger slice of the pie than it used to have, they already have that being split 30 ways evenly today. So you sort of have a natural revenue sharing effect if you take the next big media deals and you declare them to be national media deals. They become central fund, at least under the current CBA structures. If they carry forward, that central fund gets split 30 ways. You're not doing this Byzantine calculation that they do for the local revenue sharing, which winds up being a pretty small sum in terms of what gets distributed and what gets taken from, like we talked about on our last show, how the Dodgers are kind of underpaying into that system from their media deal. And we showed, what portion of the Pirates' likely revenues are coming from local. It's not all that much relative to everything else. So if they go national with things, you sort of just get a natural revenue sharing effect from just big national deals getting done.
Can we, before we wrap up, can I also bitch and moan about this? I have talked to people in my life. I've heard it on the radio here. I've read it on the internet. This idea that we need a salary floor. It drives me up a fucking wall because that's the minimum wage we have a salary floor in the country of the United States. It's the minimum wage, right? Mm-hmm. If globally we all set the same floor or minimum wage, it would be a de facto global floor for every worker on the planet. That exists in Major League Baseball. It's the minimum wage for any player. So there's already a cost. You have to field, in order to be the Pirates, you have to put players on the field. In order to do that, you have to pay them the minimum, and that's your floor. I don't know if people don't understand that concept or if they are just, I'm not sure. It just, so that right away just is like a knife in my ear every time I hear it.
To defend them a little bit, when they say they want a floor, they mean I want a floor that I care about. When you multiply whatever it is, like $750,000, it's like $750,000 is the minimum MLB salary right now, something like that. Multiply that by 26, that's the de facto floor. Well, that's pathetic when you compare it to what a real major league team salary looks like. And it's much, much lower than what even the Pirates spend on their salaries for the team altogether. So, like, yes, technically there is a minimum there of 26 times the minimum salary, but that doesn't get you what you want. When what you want is, I want Bob Nutting to spend $150 million on players because that's what I see the Twins doing sometimes, and I want to be the Twins. I want to sign Carlos Correa. I want to feel good about my offseason. I want to feel like I'm a peer to the Phillies. I want to be a peer and get to go to the same club as the Red Sox a little bit. Like, I don't get all of their, they'll have like 6 or 7 Carlos Correa level players on their payroll, but if we have one, well, then at least we don't get laughed at. I think that's what it is. People just don't want to be dressed down. They don't want to feel less than. And so there's a certain embarrassment to not having any big free agent signings and big splashy offseason moves to puff up your chest a little bit and see, yeah, we're at least that much relevant. Is there anything to that, or am I just making shit up?
No, that's correct. I think you nailed it. But I mean, technically, I just get annoyed by the fact that there's in order to operate, to keep the lights on, as you say, that by definition there has to be a floor to do that, and so there is a floor. And this discussion of a cap and a floor, and this like mealy mouth, like we need a floor, bro, is. Are they brain dead? Do they not watch other sports? Do you think the Green Bay Packers have these revenue streams that are like the same that Jerry Jones has?
That's
the
baseball
league cuts
brain,
them
man.
a check.
They don't.
It
they
is.
really don't.
They don't. It's ridiculous.
I think that baseball fans are so insular oftentimes that they look at the way that baseball's economics are structured, and they really do think that they're laws of nature. They really don't understand that these are just compromises stacked on compromises, that it's all completely artificial. It's completely changeable if the men running it decide to do so. And they don't even imagine what it could be like if, what kind of advantages could exist in a cap system if it wasn't being implemented by malicious assholes. Like if there was an arbiter handing down a fair system, like you would have players reaching free agency when they're 25 and 26 because team control is only 3 years or 2 years or something like that. And you get service time, the clock starts ticking the moment you get called up, and it doesn't matter how many games, like all of the sorts of things that everybody gets upset about, that not being fair, all of that goes out the window, or should, under a salary cap, because all of those little nitpicky details trying to suppress the wages of the players onesie twosie like that. Well, when there's a cap, it's a cap. Who cares what happens underneath the cap? Now we can we can have free agents moving constantly. You would have NBA style free agency where not only would the players be free agents, all of them free agents in their prime, all of the teams would be competing for them, and so you'd have so much
in the
interest.
NBA, right? In the NBA, you have a system that's like very unique in the sense that you have your rookie deal, you have your like minimum salaries, you have your mid-level exemptions, you have all these different exceptions to the rules. But, the NBA teams spend 90% of the cap on players' salaries. And, it's a system that gets guys paid, Within 2 to 3 years of you being an effective rookie player in the NBA, you're looking at your first big contract, which is Brian Reynolds level money, like right off the bat, right? Now, granted, there's less players in the NBA by default, so there's more money to go around because there's just less of them. But
you can look at hockey, though. Hockey is a good scale model for baseball. The NHL has roughly half the revenue that Major League Baseball grosses each year. The rosters are roughly the same size. They play half as many games. They do so in arenas that are roughly half the size or a little bit less than half the size of baseball stadiums. So you can look at the NHL as a 1/2 scale model economically of Major League Baseball. And yet rookies on the minimum deal in the NHL make more than rookies 0 to 3 players in Major League Baseball making league minimum. And
that's what I don't understand
about
the
revenue.
That's what I don't understand about fans, because
they don't know.
I know baseball baseball players or baseball fans are insular. I would agree with you, but
Yeah.
there's also an incredible overlap of millennials and Gen Z kids that, follow other sports. And so the NFL in the 2025 season averaged 22 million viewers per game. So it's not as if these players or these people who are watching these players are like, I don't understand how any of this works. I've never seen it before. There's 22 million sports fans that know the ins and outs of these fucking. I was watching an NFL game that was like nothing downstairs. Like people are watching the shittiest fucking games.
Yeah.
And they're talking on the telecast about caps and signings and this and that. And, guys, getting exemptions and void years and all this technical jargon. And then you talk to the same fans and you're like, hey, that'd be cool if you did it in baseball. And they're like, oh, I don't understand. What are you talking about? What is a salary cap? What's that thing we just watched? The guys playing with the football, like they were just talking about like void years, cap. It's the same. We're just going to take that and just stick it over here. It's going to be the exact same thing. Well, that can't be. I don't understand. How can that possibly be? It was like, well, they do it over there. So we're just doing the same thing here.
I don't know how they don't know.
Like you guys understand that like there's no like RSNs for football, right? Like we watch CBS and ABC and Fox, and like the Green Bay Packers spend $300 million on payroll. Like the Steelers, how does that happen? And people are like, I don't know. It's football, man. It's just, I literally, it just.
They don't think about it. They most of what they just hear from the Adam Schefters of the NFL, and it's no longer Waj in the NBA. Who's the new Waj?
Oh, Shams.
Okay, Shams. So they hear. They get their sort of like their taste of the business from the insiders.
Brian Windhurst.
And baseball's no different. And so when you have the insiders of baseball all towing the Boris line so that they don't lose their sources, then the fans are just going like, that's all they hear. And they don't stop and imagine like, well, wait a minute. Could this work? No, they don't even think about it that far. And they don't bother to look at like, well, how does it work in the NHL? And what if we mapped that onto baseball? What would it look like? And maybe that's stupid to do because you can't just take the NHL and map it onto MLB and think that it'll get done. But it worked there.
Here's another one that bothers me about this argument. And this is another one that I have heard. I've heard this one on the Fan quite a bit, like the radio. When I do listen to the Fan, like driving in the car and stuff, and they do talk about baseball, it's always Bob Nutting derangement syndrome, which we're going to have to do another episode about that come spring training, because I'm sure there'll be more Bob Nutting derangement to go around.
Yeah.
And rightfully so, because he sucks ass. But they also do this thing where they don't seem to grasp that like player contracts will go away in a new system, right? And the first one that comes to my mind is pre-NHL. Like everyone's like, well, what about Ohtani? What about Soto? How are we going to do that in a baseball system, bro? Can't do that. So I guess you can't do it. And it's like, well, Bobby Holik got this monster contract in 2002. If you remember Bobby Holik, he played for the Rangers. He was a good player, but he was not like a world-class player. I mean, he was very good. And he got this ridiculous contract from the Rangers. It was like a $50 million contract. And that was kind of one of these like, oh shit moments. Like if Bobby Holik is getting whatever the number, $45, $50 million from their fucking Rangers, we are so fucked. In Penguins land, we can't, I mean, that was like, it was a big deal. Right? Like Coyotes fans and Thrashers fans and Flames fans. And we're all like, oh, fuck. And then they locked out. They had a lockout. Then they changed the entire structure from top to bottom. And you know what happened to Bobby Holik? He got paid.
Yep.
He got paid.
The grandfather
did. Very powerful. He goes grandfather did. The very powerful lawyers and the very powerful accountants.
To phase it or like just...
Yeah. Buy it out over time and defer
or they just defer it even
and pay
more.
It with interest.
Right. Ohtani's already getting deferred.
Right.
Ohtani's perfectly happy not getting paid by the Dodgers right now. Ohtani would continue to not get paid by the Dodgers and get mostly paid by brands in Japan and New Balance, where he makes almost all of his money right now,
Right, where
is
he's
from
on
endorsements.
he's everywhere.
Yeah.
Did you see this TikTok video of this girl in Japan who apparently had no idea who Otani was? She was like this younger woman who they were asking, and she was like, I don't know who this is. And they just showed like a montage of his
pan up to all the billboards behind her that have Otani on them.
He's literally on everything.
Yeah.
My next door neighbors were in Japan for their honeymoon, and I asked them, I was like, did you guys see Otani? And they're like, he's and these are a gay couple who have no interest in sports outside of just like, casual conversation. And they knew Otani strictly through their Japanese experience of being like, who is this
guy?
Let's
on
look
the
him
shampoo ads, the guy from the cologne, the guy selling the car. Yeah.
Right. And there's this other narrative I want to talk about before we go on this one is, again, this is on the radio. These are like all on the radio here. Is this deferment thing. And I think we've had people talk about this with us, in person, where it's like, well, the deferrals, what are we going to do about deferrals? The deferrals are ruining baseball. It's like they've been giving deferrals in baseball since like Pie Traynor in the 1920s. Like guys would get a pension benefit from their team. And this is before unionization. This is before actual pension benefits. And that was like a key clause in some of their contracts, which is by itself, the definition, a deferral. So this idea that somehow deferrals are new and they're fancy and they're scary and they've been part of the fabric of baseball as long as we've had baseball. In fact, yours truly, the Pittsburgh Pirates, gave out a deferral to Dave Parker, I believe, in the 70s. So,
deferrals got Mario Lemieux the deed to the Penguins.
Well, yeah, that's a bit different. Way. Yes, it did. That's exactly right. Because Howard Baldwin didn't have any money. But my point is that there's nothing new about deferrals. They're part of, they might get. Should they be regulated in some way? Perhaps. I don't know. It's not really. I don't think they're that detrimental. Any team can give out a deferral if they want.
They're accounted for in the CBT, so it's not like the Dodgers are not paying luxury tax penalties for the net present value of those deferred dollars. Like the deferrals, if anything, it's just a way to inflate the top line number of a contract beyond what it actually is. It's like the Powerball or the Mega Millions. When you see the jackpot number in the window of the sheets, and it says $800 something million, but that's if you get it paid out over 25 years. That's deferred money.
Yeah, I have a Fangraphs article called "Despite Stardom and Swagger, Dave Parker is Still Short of Cooperstown" from 2019. And in that article, they cite that in January 1979, the Pittsburgh Pirates signed Dave Parker to a 5-year deal that ran from 79 to 83, which was the first $1 million a year contract in baseball. Although the contract term was 5 years, a large portion of the total compensation was deferred. Specifically, his base salary during his playing years was modest. It was $300,000 a year, which is nuts because these guys are only getting paid $780,000. And a large bonus plus deferred payments were scheduled for later years. Approximately $5,625,000, $5,625,000 in deferred payments beginning in January 1988 and continuing through 2008. Under the 1979 contract. So maybe we were missing out on Dave Parker Day. Instead, we were doing dumb Bobby Bonilla Day, which in itself was a deferral. So deferrals, I'm not, let's not, they're not going to go on strike and penalize the Dodger or do a lockout or whatever.
Again, I think it's fans misunderstanding what they actually are and what they allow to happen. Now, the Dodgers, they've done it way more than anybody else. Like the amounts of deferrals that they're carrying is way, way more. And deferrals are accounted for in the debt service rule. So if you're a big revenue team like the Dodgers or the Yankees or the Red Sox, pick a big revenue team, your capacity to defer is much larger because it's considered debt. It's much larger than, say, the Pirates' capacity if they wanted to defer any money. They don't, but if they wanted to, they couldn't defer as much because they don't have the revenue to support the debt and servicing the debt. So, like, that still just circles back to the issue is the revenue imbalance. The issue is that you've got teams making 7 or 8 times as much as their peers, and yet they're all supposed to compete for the same resources. Like, that's obviously not going to yield good competition a lot of the time. So maybe that's what you fix.
Yeah, you have the structure there, like we talked about. Build out on those things. If I'm Tony Clark, I'm asking for, something in that realm, and those dollars to be used for Major League payroll, to be earmarked for Major League payroll, and we'll negotiate from there. See what we get. It's something like that. I mean, if they're not going to lock out and burn the season down, and we're going to get this kind of tinkering around the edges, then it better be something. I mean, it blows my mind is that it's not. It's going to be exactly what happened the last 2 times we lived through this, and the last time before that, which was during the peak of the internet era, which is we follow along with bated breath. We're waiting for something big to happen. Nothing happens. It's more of the same. And then everybody gets on the internet and every message board, Bucks Dugout and Reddit and Discord and all these other places we go. And, the comments section of MLBTR, which I see a lot of stupid shit there. That's like a cesspool of one-celled organisms.
Yeah, I would not.
Those fucking idiots. Not the writers, not the website, the fucking posters and the comments are morons. And they're going to be like, I don't get it. Nothing changed. We need a salary cap. I've seen that. It's like the day after. The ink isn't even dry on the goddamn thing. The guys are getting in their car, not even at spring training yet. And their fans are like, nothing happened. What do you mean? I'm confused. It's like,
well, we tried to tell you. I will make this my parting note. Major League Baseball has not yet released its gross revenue numbers for the 2025 season. That usually comes in like December or January. But in 2024, Major League Baseball said it grossed $12.3 billion. That means that all of the teams in baseball, if you add up all the money they made, gross, not net, but gross, it was $12.3 billion. If you divide that by 30 teams,
let's give it 50% to the players. That's $6 billion.
If we give 50% of that to the players, it's $6.15 billion.
Let's just make it 6.
That is an average of $205 million per team across 30 teams. So if you have a salary cap system that is indexed to revenue, like all of them are, it's not just a number, it's indexed to revenue. So when the revenue goes up,
out of thin air,
the cap goes up, and that
wait a minute, is that like in the NFL? I don't understand. What's football?
It's like that in the NFL. It's like that in the NHL. It's like that in the NBA. When the revenue goes up, the cap goes up.
Right.
$205 million per team. So if you make a little bit of wiggle room there, you could very easily have a cap of 225 and a floor of 185, or even closer together than that. And every team would be spending at least $185, $190 million on their payroll, and nobody would be spending more than 220, 225. They got to have some wiggle room. All the other leagues do it. But that's what it would look like. That's what your cap and floor system would look like if revenue was shared equally the way it is in basically all of the other leagues. And you would have how many teams' revenues would go up substantially if everybody had the revenue. And I mean, it's the same amount of money being spent. We talked about revenue being what causes the Dodgers payroll to be what it is, and revenue causes the Pirates payroll to be what it is. If everybody has the same, you're getting the same amount of money MLBPA. So it's about where do you want it distributed? Do you want it to go to a dozen premier players who get the big $500 million total value contracts? Or do you want all the guys on the 26-man roster to make $1.5 million as a rookie? And do you want guys going to free agency and getting a nice 8-figure contract when they're, even if it's just Jared Triolo, you know, getting paid to be a good defender when he's
There are players
27.
like that in the NBA that get paid $13-14 million a year.
You would have like a middle class in the game again. The middle class that has vanished from baseball. All you have in baseball these days is guys making 9 figures and guys making 6 figures. You know,
and Brian Reynolds.
He's one of the 9-figure guys. See, he got his big 9-figure contract.
Okay, Brian Hayes is the one I'm thinking of then.
Yeah, so
so he's like kind of weirdly in the middle.
Yeah, and that you get that when you get the extensions. But I mean, we've talked this to death. I think we've ran this to ground for this topic this time. There's probably more to say. I'm sure we'll come back to it. There's going to be a lot of CBA discussion and labor discussion over the coming months and year leading up to the lockout in December of 2026, and not a moment
So let's
before.
go over it really quick. I'm going to part with this. What is a strike? A strike is a work stoppage caused by the refusal of unionized employees to work. Pretty simple. Who can strike? The unionized employees. What is a lockout? That's the employers withholding labor, withholding their job from the unionized workforce. I'm sorry, withholding the ability to go to work. It's like that's what we're talking about. It's not anything more radical than that. So let's start by understanding the basic terminology here and go forward, because I can't do it anymore. I'm going to kill myself if somebody tells me the player's going to strike, bro. Fart sound.
No, they won't.
It's not going to happen.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. Nothing until next
right.
December. Not this December, next December. And so
Right.
we'll leave that for another time. Thanks everybody this is a long one. Thanks everybody for hanging around for our rambling about labor and the CBA. And you can find our
Cut some of it.
audio links in the description of the YouTube, or if you're listening on a podcast player and feel like watching this one for some reason, there's nothing to see, those links are in your podcast player to take you to the YouTube. Please like, please subscribe, or
don't. I don't care. Doesn't matter. You can lock us out if you'd like, or maybe we'll go on strike. Who knows?
but we're not in a union. We're just doing this for fun.
We're a union. We're a union of 2. What are you talking about? We've unionized today. Card check. You got your card? Sign it. We're a union, buddy.
Oh man.
We're also the employers.
What
What do we do?
What are my union dues? How much do I owe me?
Well, I don't know. But I'm going to lock you out if you don't shut up about it. So
Well,
don't come
we
to
should
work
probably
tomorrow.
lock out this show. So take care, everybody, and we'll talk to you when we feel like it.
Bye.
Bye.